Guys who got told no during a failed marriage proposal, what happened afterwards? Story 1. Not my story, but told from our jeweler when we were buying our wedding bands. So a guy comes in to buy an engagement ring. The jeweler sits down with him to talk about design, cost, and what have you. Our jeweler always asks people about how they are going to propose. She likes to share in the excitement. The guy brags about how he is going to propose to his GF at a ball game, on the big screen in front of the entire stadium while his favorite team plays. As the guy is speaking, our jeweler notices that everything is centered around the guy, from the ring to the proposal. No mention of what his GF likes. Our jeweler gets a bad feeling, but she sells him the ring. Not long after the guy comes back in with the ring, the GF said no, which really didn't surprise the jeweler. Story 2. Not my own experience, but I was in the restaurant when a failed proposal happened. Somehow, the guy was able to get the families involved in this fancy dinner without the girl's knowledge as to what was going to happen. He orders their drinks, where he had the ring cleaned and then placed at the bottom of her pina colada drink. She gets up and goes to the bathroom, and that's when some of her family moved in close with their cameras, phones, ready for the proposal. She comes back and the drinks are brought. She refuses the drink, much to his dismay, but doesn't get the hint. She doesn't want it. You should have your drink, it's really good. She again says no. This goes on back and forth. Finally, she says no and is disturbed by his pushy behavior. I hear this from my table. I can't marry someone who won't respect my boundaries. She gets up and walks out of the restaurant. The guy sits there waiting for her to cool off. She doesn't come back in, so he fishes out the ring and has the drinks taken away. She comes back in near the end and he shows her the ring, tells her it was in the drink. And she slaps him and says no. This time she is angry and leaves. Everyone packs up and heads to pay. He just sits there by himself. I wanted to get up and say something, but my date was ready to go home. Story 3. Not the guy here, but the naysayer. He had just finished a 1,000-mile solo cycling tour, and I met him at the finish. I was so caught up in his achievement that I did not see the proposal coming, and I was shocked. So I told him right there, I love you, but I can't give you an answer right now. Of course, there were tears, and we both called family members and then continued on our planned holiday. We had such a good time on our holidays and were able to enjoy each other's company like normal. So I figured that if we can handle this bump in the road this well, we are a great team, and at the end of the holiday I told him I would love to marry him. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't regretted my decision for a second. I simply needed time to process a life-changing choice, and my partner was mature enough to understand this. Story 4. Not me, but a proposal I saw. I was vacationing in Las Vegas back in 2006 with my then family. We took in a show a day on the trip. The day after Christmas, we saw a magic show. About halfway through the performance, the magician had a young woman from the audience come up and assist with some trick. He did the meet and greet with her. She was on a vacation with her boyfriend's family and blah, blah. The magician does his thing, and then suddenly the boyfriend appears out some box that deceptively empty just a second ago. The boyfriend goes down on his knee, out comes the ring, and he goes into his declarations of love and affection and rehash the last few years. It was a sweet proposal. She smiles and clasps her hands in front of her face and says, "Absolutely nothing." We in the audience are all silent and waiting to cheer and applaud, but waiting for her to say yes. It seemed like an eternity. But then the magician burst out with applause. He quickly guided the happy couple off the stage and announced, "She said yes." So we all cheered for the happy couple. What else was he going to do? They had great seats at a table, center stage and down in the front, where we could see the happy couple and family. The poor girl sat by herself and the dude huddled with his parents at the other side. I don't think they talked at all the rest of the show. Story 5. Was with a girl for a couple years. I started talking about getting married. She was up for it, but kind of distant about it. I take her out ring shopping and she breaks down. Tells me she can't marry me. I was really confused. I thought things were going great. Turns out I was just the guy taking care of her until her ex gets out of prison. I paid for her schooling, helped her get off sweets. We were looking at houses. I thought we were making a life together. She left me not long after that. He got out of prison a few months later. She went back to stripping. I ran into them a few times. I guess she's happy. Story 6. I got everything ready and she said no, at least not right now. And it sort of muted the rest of the weekend. Several people heard I was going to ask and congratulated me the next week. It was surreal informing them she said no. It should have been a wake-up call to just end it there, but neither of us wanted to. We were our first everything and we had a lot of history. I guess I thought it would just work out, but her reservations on being married at that time never really went away. I admitted that both of us wanted exclusive things. Our lives were headed towards opposite directions, and compromise just meant someone was going to be resentful. When we started dating, both of us really helped each other out in a lot of areas and through some really challenging times. But we learned, later on, that things that were great then may not be great now. Both of us were good people, but some things just have a lifespan. We got what we needed, and it was time for the next phase of our lives, alone. A huge part of successful marriages requires compromise on small issues, but some issues have no compromise. It's okay to fight for things if there's a way that both of you can get what you want. And there's no shame in letting things go if there's nothing more than can be done. We broke up 7 or so months later. Restarting life, for what was the second time for me, was tough because I was also going through a lot of Othet things and she wasn't able to be there anymore. The same thing was happening on her end, so it just kind of ended there. We both dated other people and got married to others eventually. So, in the super longer term, it was all okay. Story 7. Guys, if you're reading this thread and want one strong takeaway from it, always talk to your significant other and make sure they want to marry you before proposing. I know the movies from the old days make it seem like it should be a surprise, but it really shouldn't be. It should be something you've been talking about for a while, and it should come after you have had multiple talks about your future together. No one likes to have to devastate someone, and a lot of hurt feelings can be avoided by communication. Let the moment that you propose be a surprise, but the fact that you would propose at all be pre-established. Story 8. Not a guy but a girl, I asked my boyfriend to marry me. I didn't do a whole scene about it. We were talking, and I said that I wanted to get married, and I felt ready for it, and he just said no. I was mad. He had never mentioned this, and we've talked about it before. All he had ever said was that he didn't want it because it was expensive and didn't want a big party. And so, in my understanding, we would get married at the courthouse and have a small gathering with family and close friends. Then I found out he didn't want to get married because his parents had a divorce, and he didn't want to go through that. It took a while to unravel all his issues with marriage. At a certain point, I said I'm not going to wait around with a guy that doesn't want to get married. I had always been very clear about wanting to get married. He disagreed and said I've also mentioned that I didn't want a big wedding. I'm like, what? We realized we were both talking about different things. He had put together marriage and the wedding, and I wasn't. Still, obviously, it wasn't solved right then and there. I gave him some time to think. After like a month, I came back to the subject, and he asked me why I wanted to get married. And I talked about all the laws that protect the couple in the eventuality of disease and death, in owning property, in security if we had children, etc. He suddenly just said, "Oh, I didn't know about that. Then yeah, we'll get married then." We've been happily married for 5 years. Almost every day he says he's so happy being married to me and that his wedding day was one of the happiest of his life. Story 9. Not a guy, but I set things up to be perfect. The two of us totally alone at sunset on a Sicilian beach, and he said no out of pure shock. He'd always expected that it would be him asking me, not the other way round. Then his brain kind of caught up with what was going on, and he was horrified at himself for just saying no like that. He told me, of course, he wanted to marry me, and he hadn't meant no, as in he didn't want to marry me. It was more like, no way did you just ask me that. But it came out wrong. We both agreed that this wasn't the proposal we'd both want to remember forever, so we'd do it again properly some other time. 9 months later, he proposed to me on my birthday in one of my favorite spots. To his relief, I didn't say no, and we've now been married 10 years. Story 10. If a girl says no to a proposal, the guy should have known better than to ask. A good friend of mine, who was only 19 at the time, heard from her parents that her boyfriend of about 4 months was going to propose at midnight on New Year's in front of her entire family. She was terrified and didn't want to say yes, but her parents were super insanely strict and threatened to throw her out of the house if she didn't say yes. I called her. I was drunk. At 11:58, and kept her on the phone for about 10 minutes telling her bad jokes and getting every single person at the party I was at to say HNY to her. Ruined the moment for the guy, and he never asked. Oops, I ruined New Year's Eve 1991 for Kevin. Oh, we've been married for 28 years now. Story 11. I'm not a man, a BF, but proposed to my GF at the time. TBF, there were a lot of complicating factors in our relationship, but regardless, I was head over heels in love with her and wanted to marry her. She said no. Our relationship continued for about a year, me hoping that she would come around to wanting to marry me. We had too many conversations about the seriousness of our relationship, and each time she would say, "Why can't you just get over it?" Meaning me asking her to marry me. I eventually ended it when I finally realized that she just didn't love me the way I did her, and that I deserved better. Unfortunately, that took longer than it should have to realize, but I'm one that if things end between us, then it's fully over. And I didn't want to do it prematurely. Everything worked out well, though. My now husband asked me to marry him, and we've been happy almost 10 years now. Story 12. Found out she had been dating a friend I had helped her to meet. Later, he proposed to her in a restaurant where a buddy and I had gone to eat. Worst coincidence ever. I ended up hearing the restaurant clap and whoop for them. Fortunately, we were on the other side of the restaurant, and that was the extent of it. Well, until they passed me on the highway when I was driving home. Second worst coincidence ever. It was like having someone step on your broken foot. Of course, they got married and then divorced because he had a wandering eye and followed up on it. As for me, I got married a lot later. My wife and I have been through plenty of medical issues together, but we've survived and are still happy together. But man, that prior experience was brutal. Story 13. We had been best friends for years and dating for a while after that, and I started asking her what she would think of marrying me. She always would say something like she would love it or that she can't think of anything better. I finally decided to talk to her mom about it, and she said she approved. I asked her a few months later, and she was pissed. She told me her mom told her I spoke with her about it, and that I was an idiot for thinking she would want to get married after I had heard for a while about how messed up her parents' marriage and divorce were. I was completely blindsided. I had prepared a romantic day together, ending at a really nice restaurant where I could privately propose to her. When I asked her why she told me so many times that she wanted to get married, she thought it was part of some role-playing or something. I still don't know what that means. Apparently, I should have known she was absolutely against marriage just because her parents' marriage was cow. Story 14. I said no to the first proposal because I thought it was too soon. It was. And we really hadn't discussed a lot of the things that are important going into a marriage. He actually agreed. Didn't bail. We waited and had those talks, and we've now been married 43 years. A no doesn't always mean the end of the relationship. I'd say both proposals were very casual. The second was basically just a convo and an agreement while we were lying in bed. If the first one would have been one of those over-the-top public extravaganzas, that would have been the end, because it would have meant he didn't know me at all. Story 15. My wife said yes, but I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop up until the wedding day. She had rejected 2 men before me on marriage proposals, and had told me she was a bit of a commitment phobe. Her matron of honor slept over the night before the wedding and slept by the front door to make sure my wife didn't leave during the night, and if she did, to call me and let me know what happened so I could enact my backup plan. I had a backup plan in case she pulled a runner at the ceremony. She almost didn't go in on the day of. I was prepared just in case. Then she showed up, we got married, and just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. She still breaks out in hives and has many bad person-outs when she realizes how long we've been together, despite having 2 kids, a house, mortgage, etc. For those of you guys dealing with commitment phobes, tell them what you've got planned. I let my wife know months ahead of time that I was planning on proposing and gained insights that if I were going to do it, that it had to be a certain way. Never propose in public unless your girlfriend is into that. Also make sure that if you are going to propose, she's aware, and that you know with certainty that's what she wants. Communicate, people. It isn't that hard. Story 16. I know a guy who proposed and got a yes, but later turned to a no. It was her birthday, so he said, let's throw a BBQ and invite the whole family over. She said, sounds great, and he invited everyone on both sides of the family, parents, siblings, grandparents, cousins. She had no idea he would propose at dinner. Marriage hadn't even been discussed. She said yes to avoid chaos, but later had a long talk. They didn't stay together much longer after that. We still tease him about it every time he invites us to a BBQ at his house. Hey, wait a minute. You aren't going to try to propose to me, are you? Still gets a laugh every time. Story 17. An ex, who had been a strange combination of crack addict, stripper, and accountant, proposed to me while we were on MDMA. I said that I'd like to answer the question when I wasn't high. I guess her trip went south and she dumped me 2 days later. Can't say I've any regrets as far as she is concerned. I did have a weird moment with another proposal. I had found the love of my life, but we'd only been together about 6 months when I proposed. She said yes, but afterwards her energy got all weird and she admitted it felt rushed. I felt really hurt, but said we could have a redo when she was ready. Luckily, things worked out. We did marry and have had a solid marriage for the last 8 years. Story 18. Not failed. My wife sniffed out my first attempt at a proposal, so I postponed it for almost a year. When she lost all hope and was ready to give up, I put my second proposal plan in motion. She worked a chocolate shop. It was the day before Easter, so the place was packed. I sat at one end of the shopping plaza looking for a dude heading that way. The second guy I asked was game to help me out. The plan was to have him go into the shop and ask to have a box of chocolates made with a ring in the middle after it needed to be delivered. My girlfriend wife actually helped put it together. At the same time, I called the store informing a coworker that my girlfriend needed to be the one to deliver it to the pottery shop next door. I walked into the shop and said I was surprising someone. Could I sit in the corner for a few minutes? A few minutes later, my girlfriend walks in wearing bunny ears, looking for a guy in a white shirt. When she saw me, she was like, "What are you doing here?" Super confused. She went back to asking where the guy in the white shirt is. I stood up and stated the box is for you. Still confused, she said, "No, it's the guy in the white shirt's box." I said, "No, open it, it's for you." It still didn't register completely. I walked over, grabbed the box, and pulled out the ring and properly proposed. She said yes. It was funny, the pottery shop was a popular date place where you paint pottery and drink wine, so the place had about a dozen people. All the girls exploded when she said yes. All the dudes gave me the stink eye. When she walked back into her work, I guess everyone had stopped working when she left and was waiting at the door screaming and cheering as she walked in. I was totally fine with it, but I got left outside in the commotion. My job was over, LOL. Story 19. When I was 21, I got involved with one of my college teachers who was significantly older than me. Somehow it kind of worked out, and we were together almost 10 years. We had the whole house and dog thing worked out. But from about 5 years into it, we started taking separate holidays because neither of us were particularly interested in what the other wanted to do. One day I had gone to his sister's place to pick him up from his most recent trip to Thailand. We lived in a regional city, and his sister lived closest to the nearest international airport. So he calls me into the guest bedroom where he's been going through all his luggage and is surrounded by dirty holiday clothes and cheap trinkets. He pulls out a small glittery bag and hands it to me, saying, "This is for you. It's an engagement ring. Will you marry me?" I was shocked and panicked and said, "Okay." Then went out to the lounge room and called my best friend. She said it's okay to go back and say no, so I did. I went back in there and explained that I didn't want to get married. He just said okay and asked me not to tell anyone he'd asked. The next day at the beginning of the 4-hour drive home, he admitted that he accidentally got a happy ending the previous time he was in Thailand the year before. I was furious with him for essentially lying by omission for the whole previous year, especially when we had maybe had close relationship once in that whole period. I broke up with him then and there and then had the most awkward 4-hour drive to continue through. I got the last laugh, though. I ended up finding and marrying a wonderful man who happens to be a massage therapist. So now I get asterisk, all asterisk, the happy endings and the irony is not lost on me. Story 20. My ex proposed to me at a reunion show I played with a band I used to be in. We hadn't been together for like 8 months and had a really bad 2020 breakup. He was really into Canon at the time. He managed to get a bunch of my family and his family to the show, which wasn't unusual, so I didn't think much about it. About 3 songs into our 30-minute set, he bought a round of tequila shots for the band, also not unusual, and delivered mine to me last. It had a ring in it, and he asked me to marry him while I was on stage in front of everyone there, including my boyfriend, now husband. All I said was, "I'm not doing this with you right now," downed the shot, and another one left the ring, and was then forced to have to fumble through the rest of that show without being able to get that stunt out of my head. Worst show I've ever played by far, and I was so pissed that he did that to me. Seemed like a mind-fudge power play, and I was so angry. The real kicker, too, was that the theme of the whole show was essentially take back the night kind of vibes to create awareness about how women don't feel safe at bars, music venues because of how some men behave. The all-female band was utterly unsympathetic, and I left immediately. Haven't spoken to them since and completely dropped out of the scene after that. Super messed up all around. Story 21. I proposed a proposal. I said I wanted her to think about getting married, but not to answer me right away. Take a few months and mull it over, unless she already knew the answer was no. If she knew the answer was no, she should tell me right away. She didn't say no, but she was immediately very cold and only got more distant. I figured out the answer was no, and when I told her that, she actually was angry with me, and said that she already made it clear that the answer was no from the beginning. At first I was confused, because I had specifically asked her not to do it in exactly that way, not saying no, but then I realized that she didn't have enough respect for me to not do the one thing I asked her to not do. So good riddance. Story 22. I was with my girlfriend for 6 years in our early 20s. I'd say for the vast majority of that, we were both pretty intellectually ill, and it was generally a cycle of constant mutual verbal abuse. It was easy to stay together, and we were clinically depressed. We did fundamentally connect, though. There was a reason we stayed together that long. I moved back in with my folks a few years into the relationship to just tread water at a dead end. Part-time, minimum wage job for a few years. Somewhere in there, I just quit my job, and my parents and I never talked about it. There was no pressure from their end. We all knew I was sick, even if we couldn't put a name to it. I was lucky to have the support from my folks. She lived with her parents the entire time and rarely took me there, a relief at the time, honestly. But it made me feel like a loser boyfriend. At year 6, she moved to another city about 45 minutes away to take a promotion, taking me by complete surprise when she said she hadn't thought about our relationship at all in making the decision. She was clearly trying to get her own life going and felt the same drag, and our long-term priorities were becoming starkly different. She encouraged me to see a therapist because I was having panic attacks on top of the long-term depression and intrusive to the sky ideations. I was realizing my life was passing me by and didn't have a way out. I saw a counselor and switched my primary care doctor. The original had refused to prescribe antidepressants. At her encouragement, and for the first time in my teen and adult life, I wasn't depressed. It was literally like walking into the sunlight for the first time. The benefits were amazing. I got motivated, started eating better, exercising, and planning how I was going to finish college. I started realizing what my real skills and ambitions were and threw my entire self into it. 10+ years removed, that was really when my life truly got started, and I felt that I was really living to my potential for the first time. While that was happening, my long-term girlfriend was still slow motion breaking up with me right when I was finally getting my cow together. It was a helpless feeling, and I had separation anxiety. We did long-ish distance for a few months. We tried to make it work, but it was still clear that she was doing her own thing, and I was secondary to all of it. It was then that in what I feel was a last-ditch attempt to bring us closer together, I planned to propose. I involved our mutual friends. Everyone knew when I planned to pop the question. Everyone was super encouraging despite everything. I asked her while we were out on a very planned date. I dropped every cent of what little money I had on it and the ring. It was a great night until I asked her. Her response was an incredulous stare and, "You don't know me at all." I drove her home in the most suffocating silence you could imagine, and then laid in bed for 2 straight days. I don't remember what happened to the ring. We made an attempt to work through it for a few weeks, but I had gotten the closure I was looking for, and I split. We were amicable about it, but it was no contact from there. I think we both had taken too many swipes to ever be friends again. It was humiliating, but also deeply necessary. I left the friend group behind, thinking I was giving her a gift of a support circle, but it was largely motivated by what I felt was my public humiliation. Unfair to them, everyone was kind about it while it was happening. I met new people in school, made new long-term friendships, saw the world, and lived asterisk. I'm thankful my ex said no. It was the catalyst that led me where I am today. I'm very happy and fortunate. I finished my degree, met my soulmate after college. We have both been successful in our careers, and together we've built a loving family. I am thankful for my ex, even if the entire thing was a prison of our own making. Story 23. I was told no during a successful marriage proposal. Does that count? We had just finished something and were relaxing in bed with each other, and while it wasn't the big moment that I was thinking of, it just felt right. Me. Hey, you know I love you, and I know you love me. Would you marry me? Her. Asterisk, giggle, asterisk, no. Now, normally, you'd think this was a bad thing, a heartbreaking moment, or a major miscommunication in relationship readiness. But really, it was basically an inside joke. See, when we first were dating, she came over to my place one night after work. It was extremely late, like 0200 or so, and I didn't want her to have to drive home. So I offered her my bed and grabbed a thin blanket and laid down on the floor so we could keep talking until we both fell asleep. I was freezing on the floor, and when she woke up, she told me to get into the bed and cuddle with her for warmth. This is a proposition that I could not refuse, and climbed into the bed. As we're laying there talking and flirting, I looked into her eyes and asked, "Me, hey, can I kiss you?" And she giggled and said no. And I accept that and went back to flirting, talking. Later on, she said I could kiss her, and we did. When I asked her why she said no originally, she told me that I was the first guy who had even bothered to ask her consent to kiss her, and she wanted to say no to see if I was serious about listening to her. So, looping back to the marriage proposal, it was basically a direct reference to that initial moment. She then laughed again and said yes. Story 24. I work at a high-end hotel. In the last year, I've had 2 people call ahead and ask what we can do to facilitate a proposal. We send a bottle of Prosecco and handwritten notes to people celebrating anniversaries, birthdays, or other occasions. But what do you write on a note for a proposal? And we do it as a favor, so we don't promise anything ahead of time. All we do is send a list of things they can buy to place in the room ahead of time and recommend our spa services as well. Both times, you could tell that Hash one. It was going to be a surprise, and Hash 2, they wanted help with it. Like the effort of a proposal should not come from other people than the one proposing, and as was already mentioned by others, never be a surprise. Both times at checkout, you could tell it was a very obvious no. If you aren't sure, you aren't ready. Story 25. I was proposed to by a man 12 years older than me, had a child. I didn't want to be an active stepmom, so I said no, as in, I don't want to care for her as if she's my own. He wanted that. I got pregnant and he proposed again after the birth, but the baby passed away after the proposal. But wedding remained on. His grandparents paid for a nice ring, but unfortunately, the crushing pressure to care for his daughter in place of mine was too much. I ran away. He pulled me back, but found out he was cheating after our baby's death anyways, so it was officially done. Anyone need a plot for a soap opera? Yet this is a true event. The drama continues on. Story 26. Not a marriage proposal, but a do you want to go out proposal. She and I were BFFs. We were always doing things together, having a great time. I figure why not take it to the next step and call each other boyfriend and girlfriend. BTW, she would have been the first black woman I dated. She said no. She explained, you're a great guy and I have a lot of fun with you, but look, you're a white Jewish guy and I'm a black woman. It would never work out. I accepted that. We stayed friends because I figure hanging out with her as friends was much better than not hanging out with her at all. A couple of weeks after I asked her, I got a call from her. Guess what? I got a boyfriend. Oh, that's nice. She then described him. He was a white Jewish guy. What happened afterwards was I moved across the country. Not for her, but because I got a great job offer. I hadn't heard from her since. Story 27. This was me. She broke up with me soon afterward because if marriage was what I wanted, then she felt like she was holding me back, and that I was better off finding someone who I wouldn't have to wait around for. I was completely devastated at the time, but she was right in retrospect. And I did it in the most idiotic way possible, too, though I really meant it. We'd only been together a couple years, and I was 21 and she was 19. Hadn't even discussed it with her first. We both went on to have a few serious relationships after that, but stayed friends. Then about 6 years after the fact, we ended up reconnecting, romantically. It's been another 4 years since then, and I'm extremely flipping grateful every day. Story 28. After my biogramps, poor dude, finally got kicked out by my grandma a few years later after being fully committed to bringing up my dad and aunt and keeping them fed somehow, she finally let a handyman in her life who had his very own struggles. Grew up with 7 siblings, most of them in jail. He was the best of them with just a gambling and drinking habit. She got him through rehab, which was rare in the late 70s OS. He let her have full control over his finances. They did not even live together at that point. When he finally had his cow together and moved in a few years into their relationship, he proposed to her, but not in a romantic way. Her doing jobs left and right wherever she could make some money and taking care of the kids. She had no savings or anything prepared for rent in any sort. He already helped with utility bills. At least she got the house from my gramps, attested to her by court, who was by then a wealthy lawyer, but otherwise wouldn't give her a penny, maybe buy the kids some clothes at times. He did love her, but could never find the words for it, as he did not experience love for the first 35 years of his life, which were miserable. So he proposed to her, calling it securing her, saving taxes, less paperwork, etc. She said she is not going to accept a proposal under these aspects. Took him almost 20 years to say to her he loved her. Proposed again with a romantic dinner and everything set up, invited my dad and aunt back. Aunt was living out of country at the time. Before he could finish his sentence, Grandma said yes. They married after 22 years of being together, through good and hard times, and were married for 20 more years until he sadly passed away to lung cancer. His third, 30 years of smoking a pack a day and working with asbestos is not good for your lungs. She is almost 90 now and still misses him every day. My douchebag of a grandpa is still alive at same age. Not to say he rather deserved it, but story 29. My ex, I talked about getting married and how I didn't want a huge gesture or a huge ceremony because I think the importance should be on the promise you make when you get engaged the rest of your lives, not a huge gesture or big expensive day. We dated for 6 years, he knew. I thought every important thing there was to know about me, that my parents and I don't see eye to eye on most things, that I'm deathly allergic to pollen. Things like that. He proposed to me by sticking the ring box inside a giant bouquet of tropical flowers at my parents' house. I had to go inside with the flowers to see what he even wanted, and then we got to go to an emergency hospital visit because my lungs stopped working. Big surprise, he's my ex. Story 30. My mom, my sisters, and I all said no the first time we were proposed to for a variety of reasons. We all ended up marrying, and he asked her eventually, and are all still married, mostly happily. I have one poor Bill, otherwise good. For myself, it was literally nothing I had considered and felt shocked someone wanted to marry me. I needed time and think it over and think through my feelings. I got proposed to around Easter and eventually said yes around the 4th of July. In general, we don't like to be surprised or rushed, lol, so discussion beforehand would have been better. Thank God none of them were public proposals. Story 31. I was distraught for months, but eventually worked past it. Mostly because my feelings were invalidated as if I really loved her. It wasn't a big deal she wasn't ready, even though she couldn't give me any reasons. Was together for 3 years, stayed for another 3, most of which were long distance because of graduate school. I worked and made inroads with a lab at the same school she went to and was planning on transferring next semester when she started emotionally cheating on me with a guy friend that she knew had feelings for her. We had convos before that point, and I told her I trusted her to navigate that friendship in a way that respects our relationship. And she said she would. She then said it was poly or break up, so we tried poly for a few months, and she ended up breaking up with me when it was clear it wasn't working for any of us. Now I'm married to my beautiful and trustworthy wife, celebrating our 1-year anniversary, together for 5, and I don't wake up to anxiety nightmares nightly, although it took a good 3 years at least to get there. Story 32. Current girlfriend, actually. About a year ago, I asked her to marry me, and she gave me an incredibly painful but calculated, level-headed response. I took her out to a beautiful place where you can look at most of the inland empire, and if there are clouds, it looks like some cow from a Disney movie. Anyway, after asking and her saying no, very gently, I remember her exact words. I love the cow out of you, but we are both just absolutely not ready. We talked about it extensively, and while I was hurt initially, she's more than shown since then that she's committed to me. We've built a better relationship since then. Not that it was bad, and we could do it right now and have talked about it. But at this point, I'm definitely not as ready as I thought I was. Tables kind of turned, actually. Edit. The place is Inspiration Point up in Wrightwood. Has a different feel that some of the mountain towns to the south. Story 33. She said yes initially, but returned the ring a few months later because I was starting to lose my hair and was forced to start shaving. She felt badly about it, but told me she was no longer finding me attractive and feared that her love would be lost for me by the time we had our wedding. She also didn't want me to have a bald head for our wedding photos, and even when I tried, and failed, to grow it back with Rogaine, etc., she didn't have the patience. It sucked. I've not had a relationship since, and I'm pretty sure it's because I do, in fact, look terrible with no hair. Guess it was best that it didn't happen after we got married. That might have been even harder to cope with. Not sure if this counts, but figured I'd add to the conversation anyway. Edit. I didn't expect this to get much attention, but since I'm getting a lot of the same responses, I feel like I should say thank you to those with the kind words and also clarify a few things. I do not look like Jason Statham or any other movie star with bald heads. Boy, do I wish I did, though. While I appreciate the sentiments, the reality is that these guys would look great no matter what they had on top. I have a strange head shape and misshapen ears that protrude. If there's any movie character I look like, it's Nosferatu. I'd love to grow a beard, but I cannot. I only get hair along my jawline and chin, and it's pretty sparse. Unfortunately, I have a pretty major disability that prevents me from ever lifting heavy weights. I'd terminate to have a ripped body, but it's probably never going to happen, especially at my age. When and if I can ever afford surgery to correct these osteo-related issues, maybe that could change. That said, I do keep in shape the best I can and have a pretty toned body if a little thin. When I had hair, a lot of girls loved my body. I looked youthful. Without hair, I have had people assume I have cancer. That hurts a lot, and no offense to cancer patients whatsoever. But looking sickly without the sickness is a major self-esteem killer. Yes, I realize I have severe depression. No, I have not sought after treatment, nor could I afford it anyway. I agree I dodged a bullet. I actually have no feelings for her at all anymore, and it was all for the best. She is married now and doing great, and I couldn't be more happy for her. Contrary to what I might have conveyed, her breaking things off no longer has any detriment to my mental health. It's more of a loneliness thing now. That and knowing I'll likely never be in love loved ever again. Again, thank you to all who replied with the kind words and sentiments. It's good to hear that there are women out there with love for bald guys. I'm sure other bald guys here appreciate what you've said as well. Story 34. I expected it, but here is why. This girl was very traditional. She expected me to ask her parents' permission. So I made a dinner date with them and we had the discussion. Her father, who is a difficult but good man, asked me what I would do if she said no to me. I thought about it for a minute and then explained that I would leave. I wouldn't wait forever for her. He was happy with my answer and granted his permission to ask her. We had always loved Key West, so we planned a trip. It snowed the night of the flight, so at the last second we drove from New England. It was actually a pretty fun road trip. Romantic details aside, I asked her. She said yes and wore the ring for the next 4 days. When we got back, she gave me the ring back, said it wasn't a good idea because she didn't want to disappoint her ex. I took a few days to process, packed my cow up and left. Sold the ring for less than half of what I bought it for. We still speak once in a while. She has always said it was the biggest mistake of her life, not keeping the ring. I have since moved on and found a wonderful woman who I hope to spend the rest of my life with. Okay, lame story done. Thanks for listening. Story 35. I asked him about it. After nearly 2 years together and having gotten through the struggles of LDR and me moving 600 miles for him. He said, I don't believe in marriage. I don't need to be married to love, spend the rest of my life with someone. I was hurt, but I was a stupid 22-year-old in love, so I just said okay. Few months later, he broke up with me. We were different places in life, apparently, and then 2 months after that, he's dating someone new and they're already living together, talking about getting married. I was completely heartbroken about it, even still recently, but after the tiring day I had yesterday of work on no sleep, I just realized I don't care anymore. There's no point in crying about him or missing him anymore. I see everything with a new clarity. Story 36. Though it technically wasn't a no, it might as well have been one. So here's the story. We were both 19, been dating since 8th grade, somehow, and both madly in love with one another. We ended up going to different colleges, but they were only 1 hour away from one another, so no big deal. I had been tossing around the idea of proposing ever since I turned 18, but figured I'd wait a little just to see what happened when we went to college. About halfway through our first semester, I decided it was time to ask, so I called her and asked if we could go do something for the weekend. She said, yeah, I actually wanted to talk to you about something, which probably should have been the first red flag. So I drive to her place, knock on the door, and she comes out. I knew something was wrong immediately because there was no hug, no inviting me in, no warmth. She looked me dead in the eye and just said, I've been cheating on you. It took a solid minute for what she said to click, but I just remember being so flipping angry and disappointed and sad all at the same time. All I could really stammer out before walking away was, I'm so disappointed. For the next couple of months, I was a total wreck, stopped eating, started drinking, made some questionable decisions. I eventually got out of the funk thanks to some counseling, a lot of reflecting, and some seriously great friends. I don't think she ever knew what I was planning to do, but I'm kind of thankful she didn't. And I'm thankful I didn't actually go through with it. Story 37. He told me no, and I was crushed. He explained that he is vehemently against marriage, and while it didn't make it hurt any less, I started to understand. Both of his parents have been married 3 times. I can get why he thinks marriage is a sham. Still, we love each other madly, so we're together. I've asked a couple times if we could just do a courthouse wedding, or file for domestic partnership, or have a wedding ceremony without it being legal, or if I could buy myself a ring to wear. No to all of that. We did agree that I can call him my husband, and he calls me his partner. His family and some of mine consider us married anyway. It sucks sometimes because I want that symbolism really badly, but life sucks more without him in it, so I deal. Story 38. I guess technically my now wife initially said no. So we had a super great relationship, and it was pretty obvious we were going to get married. So one day, while going to pay the rent, I said without thinking, I think we should start planning the wedding. Confused, she looks at me and says she's not planning anything, we're not engaged. Pauses a few seconds and asks if I was asking her to marry me. I have to pause and think about it a second, and I say, yeah, I guess I am. To which she responds by saying, no, you don't have a ring. Next weekend, we go out, buy a ring, I later proposed more traditionally, and fast forward, 5 years later, we're happy and have a family. Story 39. I asked a woman I had known for a long time to marry me. Her reply, I will never marry you. What if the man of my dreams comes along later and sweeps me off my feet? That caused me to think long and hard about my relationship with her. I came to the realization that it was a one-way relationship. If she needed money, I helped her. If she wanted someone to go on a trip with her, it was me. If she was having a bad day or a bad week or a bad year, she turned to me for emotional support. But if I wanted a shoulder to cry on, I had hers. For about 5 minutes before I was told something along the lines of my need to get over it and move on. I realized I let her have 51% of the vote on where we traveled, where we went out to, and who we hung out with. She never made an effort to pay back a cent of the money I had given her over the years. I realized I was her emotional tampon. When her heart was bleeding, I was what she used to soak up the blood. I stopped putting effort into that relationship. When she asked why I was distant, I told her, and she tried to blame it all on me. We have now gone our separate ways, and we don't talk anymore, which is fine by me. A year later, she did get married. The guy she married filed for divorce 9 months later. A mutual friend told me it was pretty much for the above reasons. Story 40. In hindsight, I should have expected it since I was cow-faced drunk, had never met her before, and the ring was stolen. Don't ask about the ring. Edit. Sorry if this is against the serious rule, but it did happen, edit too. Okay, since people are asking, haha, I'm an unpleasant person in this story. Basically, I ran into this guy from high school at a party a few years later. He was talking about how he found the girl of his dreams and was going to propose to her, but was waiting for the perfect time. He was carrying the ring in his jacket pocket, so if the perfect moment came up, I don't know, maybe some sort of walking in the park at night scenario? I didn't particularly like him, and after a few drinks, I got the brilliant idea that I should propose to her first. Because that's how it works, right? First come, first serve. So I grabbed the ring from his jacket he had left slung over the couch and proposed to her. Story 41. Well, it was a beautiful and sunny day on the shores of Oregon. We were together for 4 years. She meant the world to me. I got down on one knee, asked her to marry me, and she laughed and said no. Then she had some stranger take our picture. She didn't even care about my gesture. It terminated me. I broke up with her because it pained me to see her or be around her. I became introverted, stopped eating, and became a total jerk. All I did was go to the gym, fight, get drunk, and hook up with girls on Tinder. But eventually I met someone I really care for. It took a while, but I became caring and loving again, even though I thought I never could. She gets me for who I am. Our relationship has a better foundation than mine and my ex's ever did. My ex was passive-aggressive, and I never really felt like myself around her. I'm not going to say that losing her was the greatest thing to ever happen to me, but the experience caused me to do a lot of growing, and I think it has made me a much stronger person.